Don't say anymore.
Whoops. Yeah, you.
That's you.
Good evening. Today is Monday, September 17th, 2018. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're here for the purpose of the regular meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. Did I say it's already Monday, September 17th, 2018? 7:30. I ask you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Cyprian, I ask that you call the roll.
Dunn.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Polumsky.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Saludo.
Here.
York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Park.
Here.
Conquest absent. Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Lost all my notes.
Brennan absent. Sabatino.
Here.
Deuter.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
12 present, 2 absent. We have a quorum. Give me 1 second. I'm looking for some notes that I seem to have misplaced. No good. What the hell did I do with them? They gotta be here. Well, oh. Found it. Jeez Louise. Long weekend. Okay, on to agenda item 3. We have an opportunity, we do have an opportunity when one of our very own does something extraordinary. We like to recognize them, give them a little recognition that they don't normally get otherwise. I'm going to ask Paul Burris and Dave Lowry to meet me over here at the podium.
Low Bridge.
Okay. A little bit about our friend Paul Burris here. Paul has worked for the city since 2016, and he's one of the folks that spearheaded our meter change program on the 16,000 homes-ish, and we're down to only 130, among other things. Paul holds water or wastewater licenses in 6 states. He also teaches water and wastewater classes for Southern Illinois University. And I'm very happy to announce that Paul has won Professional Manager of the Year for his work in water resources. And Dave Lowry from the APWA is here to tell us a little more about it. Dave?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is my honor to be here this evening. I do have the privilege, as the president of APWA, to live only about 20 miles down the road in Elgin, so it's a pretty easy trip for me to get here, and my pleasure to come and do this for Paul. A little bit about the award, the Professional Manager of the Year Award in Water Resources. It recognizes dedicated service within the field of water resources. To be a candidate for this award, you have to demonstrate certain criteria, success in certain criteria: professionalism, leadership, fiscal responsibility, innovation, sustainability, customer service within the community. And Paul, through his application and through the work that was done in that application, was deemed by his peers to meet all those criteria, is deserving of this award. So, without further ado, it's my honor again as APWA president, and on behalf of the board of directors of APWA, to present Paul this prestigious award.
Let's go stand up front for the picture. I asked Paul if he wanted to say a couple of words, and it does not surprise me. He said no.
Knows only one.
Few words.
Knows
As
only one
council
word.
and audience will recall, Paul's been with us April of 2016, and I think in the last 2.5, 3 years, we've had 9.5 stormwater projects come online, so you can guess what Paul's been working on. But let's do this. Paul, here you go. You stand in the middle. I see you got a lot of folks supporting you out here, too. Do you have any family out here? I do. Kelly, where are you?
Let's go.
Hey, we're not gonna wait for him to announce everybody. Everybody who's related to Paul, you gotta come on up, let's go. Keith, let's go. Mom, that looks like a mom.
Oh, y'all, get up here.
Your wife Kelly? Yes. Wonderful. Who were the two shy guys from? Those would be your waist line. Oh, God. You're doing to make me look good, I appreciate it. All right, so before we take our next picture, why don't you tell me everybody who's here?
This is my wife Kelly, my mother-in-law Ruth, my father-in-law John, my uncle Mickey, my, okay, then who's in here? And Joe, and my nephew who is superintendent in pneumatics, Steve McGee.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's gather around. You're in the center. Let's get family around. There'll be a bookend. Come on in here. Where's Howard? Howard, why don't you stand on the far end over there? Not family. That's okay. Keep balance. Feel free to direct us straight when you're wrong here.
Get behind him or out of the
We
picture.
good? All right, everyone see the camera. We good? Congratulations.
Congrats, Paul. He needs more millions of dollars. Thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work. Appreciate it.
Congratulations, Paul, quite an achievement.
Congratulations.
Thanks for all you're doing.
I mean, I know we need it, but
Well deserved, Paul.
Thanks for all your work, Paul. Thanks.
congratulations.
Thanks, Paul. Good job.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Glad to have you.
Congratulations. Watch your step.
Yes,
right.
you didn't make us look good. I'm trying. I'm really trying.
Oh, there you go. He always wears like you're upset. No one else not there on.
Okay. Yep. Okay, one last thing as it relates to Paul, as he was quick to point out, did not want to take credit alone. Anyone here in the audience who works with Paul, please stand up so you can be recognized along with his hard work. Anybody else? Come on, Tony, everyone else. There you go. Thank you, everybody. Okay, on to agenda item 4, receipt of written communications from the public. At this time, is there anybody who has any written communications they wish to submit to council? If so, please raise your hand so I can get a count. Anybody with any written communication?
Don, do you have a pen I could borrow?
Seeing none, we'll move on to public forum. This is an opportunity for anybody, oh, I found my pen, Don. This is an opportunity for anybody in the audience to address the council and specifically the chair on any items they so choose. When your name is called, we ask that you make your way to the microphone over to my right, your left. We ask, out of respect for the work that we have to get done here this evening and out of respect for others that may want to speak, that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. We are recording this, so we ask that you state your name for the record. Address is optional. If you do go over your 3 minutes, I will give you a gentle reminder and ask you to wrap up. Clerk Cyprian, at this time, is there anybody who signed up for public forum?
I have no one.
No one signed up for public forum. At this time, is there anyone who did not have an opportunity to sign up for public forum but wishes to address the council? If so, please raise your hand.
Nobody signed up?
I see one. Okay? Mr. Pragash?
He's making.
Lord Bargach, 566 West Gladys. I assume you've all seen this. Interesting document. History of the city of Elmhurst. Started a long time ago. Yes, it has. but it's radically changed. They didn't have TIFs back then. Councils didn't give away blocks of money to commercial enterprises. No, they didn't. And the town developed. Today, any business that comes into this town doesn't go to a bank, it comes to the city and says, I want money to establish myself. And the city liberally gives it out. Not only under the TIFs, shares of taxes, sales taxes, even increased the line of credit. But the things that both need, the resident who are cheering today, and those commercial properties, don't contribute a nickel. Retention is done with general obligation bonds. The repair of the treatment plant is done with general obligation bonds. Commercial enterprises don't contribute a penny to it. Let alone this council at the last meeting didn't think that was enough. Now we're going to pay for advertisement. They voted for black iron. Didn't understand what they were voting for. Didn't know what it meant. And even the city personnel couldn't explain it. But you're going to pay for it. Not you. The residents. Because all that money you're giving away has to be made up somewhere. Well, I think the retention is a fine idea, as long as everybody was paying for it. But that one large entity in this town isn't. They come to you as representatives of the people, and you give them the town without hesitation.
Mr. Paga, I should ask you to wrap up your comments, please.
The one surprising thing is you ought to look at the agenda. In all the meetings I've been at, it has never shown up what the city was selling. The last couple agendas, including this one, indicate what you're selling. Why not in the past? What provoked it? What are you worried about? And you ought to look at the treasurer's report just to see how much you sell off.
Anyone else? Mr. Powell?
Good evening. My name's Edgar Powell. My comments will just be fairly quick tonight. I'm here to talk about item 7.10 on the agenda. It's the consultant services, the renewal of the consulting services contracts. I spoke about it briefly during the DPZ meeting, and I might just reiterate some of the comments I made back then. So the good news about the consulting contracts is that the city actually ends up saving somewhat. In the long term, you're keeping the number of billable hours the same, and you're also keeping the pay rate the same. And over a 3-year period, we've had roughly 5% inflation according to BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So while in nominal terms you kept the rate the same, in real terms the city actually ends up saving 5%. So I think that's a good move that you're making there. However, I would also encourage the council to take another look at Mr. Bartels' work and make sure that there's no significant overlap with other full-time staff or in-house staff that is hired by the city. I understand that Mr. Bartels does a lot of work with communications and economic development, and there are city staff people who do that work on a day-to-day basis. So I just encourage the council to take another look at that. If you want to approve it tonight, that's fine. I just wanted to raise that concern with you. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Seeing none, that concludes our public forum portion of the evening. On to announcements. Any announcements from the dais? Seeing none, we'll go on to, oh, Ellen has an announcement. I apologize. Clerk Cyprian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. April 2nd, 2019 is the upcoming consolidated election. Those seeking to run for a local political office at the April 2nd, 2019 consolidated election may pick up candidate packets from the city clerk at the administration office beginning Tuesday, September 8th, 2018. The open seats up for election are 7 aldermanic positions, 1 for each of the 7 wards. The first date to circulate petitions for candidacy is Tuesday, September 18, 2018. For more information, visit the city's website at elmhurst.org.
Any other announcements? Seeing none, we'll go on to consent agenda at this time. Is there any item on the consent agenda any alderman wishes to have removed, to vote no, or provide further comment? Alderman Braham,
Item 7.10.
okay? 7.10. Alderman York,
Item 7.13.
7.13, 7.10, and 7.13. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items 7.10 and 7.13. Motion by Alderman York, second by Alderman Dunn. Clerk Spencer.
Dunn?
I'm sorry, Clerk Cyprian. I apologize. Don't mean to-
Leader?
Aye.
Palomsky?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Bluto?
Aye.
York?
Aye.
Levin?
Aye.
Park?
Aye.
Conquest? Absent. Kennedy?
Aye.
Mulliner?
Aye.
Brennan? Absent. Sabatino?
Aye.
Deuter?
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Consent agenda is approved, minus items 7.10 and 7.13. On to agenda item 7.10. This is a report out of DP&Z. Clerk Cyprian, I'd ask that you read the recommendation.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Development Planning and Zoning Committee that the City Council direct the City Attorney to prepare individual consultant agreements with Van Slyke Enterprises and Ken Bartels for real estate consultant services as described above. Signed, Michael Honquist, Chairman, Noel Toludo, Vice Chairman, Mark A. Mulliner.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Toledo, second by Alderman Mulliner. Alderman Toledo, your report.
I'll defer to the person who pulled the report.
Okay. Alderman Braham, I believe you pulled this. Want to provide comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And excuse me for my voice tonight. I have asked questions about this probably for the past few years, I don't know, 5 to 10 years in regards to our consultant services, and not the individuals themselves, even though that's what's in the report tonight, but actually about the roles, and is there, as the resident Pell stated tonight, is there overlap? I discussed this at the budget cycle, I think the last couple, if not more. And I do have concern in regards to overlap between full-time staff and some of our consultant services. Both roles have served us well in the past, and I believe there is, at least partially, some value in continuing these roles. By law, we are not required to go out for professional services and receive bids. But I think, and I think I mentioned this during the budget cycle as well, I think it would be worthwhile to explore to see what is really the going rate due to these roles being where they're at for many, many years now. The role, which I don't know how it's described or what is the title of the role, so I'll just talk about the role via the individual's name, is the one that I have more concern with, which is Mr. Ken Bartel's role in the city of Elmhurst since 2009. He's done some great things for the city of Elmhurst, but as the resident already stated, my concern is things have changed. Since this role was created in 2009, we've hired an assistant city manager, which, as was stated when we went to look for assistant city manager, that the primary focus would be economic development. As assistant city manager, primarily looking for economic development. And that is one of the tasks or roles for this consultant, being economic development. Since this, we've also hired, and I don't know if this is the appropriate title, but economic development coordinator. I believe that's been about 2 to 3 years ago as well. So we not only hired an assistant city manager to focus on economic development, we have an economic development coordinator to focus on, full-time, focus on economic development, and a consultant, at least for part of the time, focus on economic development. I see a significant amount of overlap just in that role itself, since we do have 2 full-time staff to focus on that. Why would we need a city consultant to also take part in economic development? The other role that this individual has, according to the report, is communications. I don't know exactly the time frame we've hired our communications coordinator, but that's been probably between 3 and 6 years. So we have a full-time staff now to handle and focus only on communications. So what is a consultant now doing since we've hired a full-time staff person to, do a better job with our communications as a city? What is the consultant doing in that realm? The one piece of the puzzle here, fundraising, and I think that's referencing the Elmhurst History Museum specifically. We don't have anybody, to my knowledge, on full-time staff that's focusing on that, and I think that piece of that role is still needed. I asked city staff earlier today, just to kind of get an understanding on where is the time spent on these 2 consultants. The role that I'm speaking of that is currently a consultant is Mr. Bartels. I did a breakdown, and approximately over the past 3 years of this current contract, anywhere from 48% to 56% was billed for economic development. Well, why if we have 2 full-time staff? Anywhere from 8 to 10% is billed on communications. Why if we have a full-time staff member for communications? So I not only had concerns before and discussed it in previous meetings and previous budget cycles, getting the data of just evaluating of what time has been spent or what time it has been billed towards, it seems like a majority of the time is redundant with full-time staff that we have already. With that said, the Heritage Foundation was billed between 22 and 24%. The other billing was due to the TIFs, which again, I would cluster into economic development. So what I see here is what's stated as a proposal in the recommendation in this report is 500 hours for $100 an hour for this role. When looking at the data, that most of the time is spent on economic development, 10% of the time is approximately communications, and about not even 25%, at the highest point, 24% is on Heritage Foundation fundraising. So at this time, I would like to make a motion to amend to, on page 2, to reduce the hours from 500 hours to 25% of 500 hours, and simple math, if I can do simple math, is 125 hours. And also strike from the first line on page 2, communications and economic development, because I think the role should only consist of, according to the data that I've reviewed, fundraising and fundraising only, and the hours should match that.
Okay, Mr. Bram, I just want to clarify, so this only relates to the paragraph that starts at the beginning of page 1, at the end of page 1 about Mr. Bartels, and the sentence bleeds over in the second page. It was the consensus of the Development Planning and Zoning Committee that a consultant for fundraising remove communications and economic development, right?
Correct.
Fundraising services be provided to the city, and then next sentence, Development Planning and Zoning Committee also do agree to a cap of 125 hours. Is that
Correct.
Proper summation of your motion? Okay, so we have a motion to remove communications and economic development in the sentence I just read, and then alter the next sentence and reduce the number of hours down to 125. I have a motion. I do not see a second. Motion fails. Let me ask, do I have a second? Let me be formal about it. You okay, Mr. Bram?
Yes, thank you.
I do not see a second. Motion fails without a second. Continued discussion or conversation? Alderman Toledo.
Thank you. You know, I will just make a couple comments. I think that most of us up here on the dais understand and recognize the valuable services that both of these consultants provide to the city. I will also clarify that these contracts are capped. So that's a maximum. The numbers that have been discussed and that are in the report are a maximum and not to exceed. They don't have to be used. We're budgeted for those amounts if they're needed, but if the services are not required of the consultant doesn't bill the hours, we don't pay those contract hours out. And then finally, I will note that there is a bit of a change in the focus for one of the consultants, which was addressed in the report, specifically to the point that we do have a communications director now, and we do have a full-time economic development person on staff. And I think everyone recognizes that the city of Elmhurst is booming from a development perspective. And so it's the staff's point of view and the committee's point of view that even with our additional resources, that we still have projects, specifically strategic plan projects, the 5 economic focus areas and the 5 new ones that we added in when we revised the plan that need time and focus that our day-to-day staff don't always get to. And that's where we're focusing the services, specifically in economic development for the contract that Mr. Bartels is fulfilling. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderman Levin.
Well, I just wanted to, if I'm reading it correctly, I want to make sure I am, there was a chart that the committee included with the report, and it seems to reflect that change in usage of Mr. Bartel's time, in that in fiscal year 2016, we were about 53,000, and by the time we got to this current fiscal year, the use of time was down to 33,500. So the 500 hours is if there's need, but it seems like that the fact that we've hired other full-time people has reduced the amount of time and work we need from Mr. Bartels. Is that correct?
That may be the case, but we would be, sorry.
Alderman Toledo, you care to respond?
Thank you. That's a good observation, Alderman Levin. But I will reinforce, though, that we tonight, if the report's approved, we would be approving that full contract amount if needed.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Alderman Bram.
Yes, thank you. I just want to add some clarity to Alderman Levin's comment. That first line item for fiscal year 2016 actually covered 13 months, and that's why it went over the cap of 50,000 to 52,625. There's a footnote. On fiscal year 2017, it was 49,350 out of the cap of 50,000. And fiscal year 2018, well, we're not done yet. So I don't know how we could say we're underspending when right now we're more than halfway spent into the $50,000 for that role. If you look at the averages out of both of the consultants, I would say the majority of the years, 95 to 98% of that cap has been spent. So even though we have a cap, we haven't gone over that cap per the contract, but we get pretty darn close to hitting 98% almost all the time.
Okay. Any other comments? Clerk Cyprian, I ask you that you call the vote on the motion before us, which is to approve agenda item 7.10.
Dunn,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Palumski,
Aye.
Graham,
No?
Toledo,
Aye.
York,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Conquest, absent, Kennedy,
Aye.
Mulliner,
Aye.
Brennan, absent, Sabatino,
Aye.
Deuter,
Aye.
11 ayes, 1 nay, 2 absent.
11 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Agenda item 7.10 is approved. On to agenda item 7.13. This is an ordinance. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask that you read the ordinance. Cyprian. You have it?
I got it.
Okay.
An ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of a non-exclusive license agreement by and between Elmhurst College and the City of Elmhurst, DuPage and Cook Counties, Illinois.
To put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman Levin, second by Alderman Palomsky. Alderman Levin.
I don't have anything to present. I'll defer to the,
Alderman York, you pulled this.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Because of my role with the college, I'm going to abstain on voting from this.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions? Clerk Cyprian.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palomsky.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Toludo.
Aye.
York. Abstain.
Yeah.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest absent. Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan absent. Sabatino.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
11 ayes, 1 abstain, 2 absent.
11 ayes, 1 abstain, 2 absent. Motion carries. Agenda item 7.13 is approved. On to agenda item 8, reports and recommendations of appointed elected officials. 8.1, Mayor Morley. That is me. A couple of things to report. First off, the Elmhurst Zoning and Planning Commission will be holding our public hearing for our sub-area plans. I think Alderman Toledo alluded to that a little bit earlier. On October 2nd, here at City Hall, 7 o'clock, the public is invited to attend and provide input. You can get more information on our website at elmhurst.org. Draft sub-area plan public hearing, October 2nd. Second, just this last weekend, Saturday the 15th, we had our 4th annual Elmhurst Craft Beer Fest. This was hosted by and put on by the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation alone. And for those of you who did not have an opportunity to attend, it was a fantastic showing. And I think without exception, almost everybody there walked straight downtown afterwards. But, well, they made their way downtown. But I want to thank everybody involved with the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation, certainly all of the folks who volunteered to help, including Alderman Palomsky, City Manager Grabowski, and his lovely wife, and pretty much half your in-laws were helping helping Elmhurst toast Craft Beer Fest. 4th annual, bigger than it had been in the previous 3 years, and we look forward to next year. Alderman Levin was there as well, impersonating me, I understand. But I want to appreciate everybody. In all seriousness, this was a fundraising event, and the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation just knocked it out of the park. It was a safe, secure event run as you would expect it, with the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation involved. Just fantastic. It really was a great showcase. And I'm not sure, usually I announce who came the farthest away. Do we know what the farthest brewery was?
I believe there was a brewery out of California that was represented.
Awesome. Dave Oberg was obviously there as well. Anyway, successful event. Looking forward to next year. Glad it was not held on homecoming like it was one year. Also, Edward Elmhurst Healthcare last, when was that? September 9th. If you blinked, you may have missed it. Over there on Schiller, they presented plans to us about a year ago, and that building is already up. And as of today, the 17th, it's open. Council was a little bit involved as we had to do a little bit of a land swap to allow for some parking. But that is, as I say, anybody who's willing to invest millions of dollars in Elmhurst, I think that's a good thing. They worked with staff and kept the disruption to a minimum. We're looking forward to that same sort of work as they bring down the old building. But it's an absolutely fantastic new building. They're consolidating some other offices in town, and they are open for business as of today. Finally, it was my privilege and honor to be part of the City of Elmhurst 9/11 Remembrance Ceremony. folks will recall that 9/11 is now deemed Patriot Day, when we honor all those who lost their lives in the September 11th attacks in 2001. It was hosted at our Station 2. Bill Anashevitz was Master of Ceremonies and did a fantastic job, along with the color guard from both police and fire. It was a good event, well-attended, somber event, certainly well-deserved, and not a lot of people know, but I know that some of our firefighters had an opportunity to help with the cleanup back when, and as a result, in some of the relationships that were made, the city of Elmhurst and the fire department actually has a portion of the railroad system, a railroad, would you call it a tie? Railroad rail, an actual rail that was underneath the one of the World Trade Centers when it collapsed. So we actually have that piece in our possession, and we're in the process of actually creating a monument with that piece. I'm not sure what the timing is on that this year, I think. I mean, within the next year. Right. So anyway, certainly want to thank all of all staff, police and fire who were involved in that ceremony. And that's it for me. City Manager?
Thank you. A few things. Neighborhood roll call tomorrow at Hillside and Crescent, 6:30. Those are coming to a close in the near future, so if you haven't been able to attend one yet this year, please, I would encourage it. And as always, you can go on the Police Department Facebook page and get that schedule. If you came in on York Street today, you know that our resurfacing project has started. We have a contract with that that was let through the state of Illinois because of some grant dollars that are being used for that. That explains the timing of when they were able to bid it, award it, and then we worked with them so it wouldn't conflict with Rock the Block. So that has started in earnest today. We've been in conversations with the contractor. We hired a resident engineer to make sure that the project runs smoothly. We're in constant contact with the folks at City Center to get communication out, as well as a lot of the store owners. What I really want to emphasize to everybody is that downtown is still open. We are signing that as much as possible, and the contractor is working closely with us to make sure that everybody can still get in and out of the downtown area. The curb work will happen during the day, but we were able to work with the bid so that the grinding and resurfacing will be done at night, so that it's the least amount of disruption to the downtown area. If you have questions, by all means contact us at City Hall. Kent Johnson is running that job. And then one more item. If you recall, maybe 2 years ago, Kmart closed and was vacant for a little while, and you've seen the at-home store being built there. I personally walked by there the other day, and they're stocked, and they are going to open this week. We are trying to confirm that it is still Wednesday of this week, but they are going to open this week, and I can't tell you the excitement I've heard from residents, as you probably all have as well, about that store opening. With that, I will, when you're ready, move on to the capital expenditure budget.
Okay. Any other reports? Alderman Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick update. I was able to attend the ONCC Fly Quiet committee meeting this morning with City Manager Grabowski, and some Elmhurst residents were also in attendance. And it was a fairly productive meeting. The consultants that the CDA uses shared a lot of benchmarking information from a lot of other cities that are trying to implement runway rotation programs. But I think that Chicago's O'Hare Airport is maybe one of the vanguards in this, and a lot of some of the other airports that were examining rotations did reference what was going on at O'Hare. So we'll make that information available for those that are interested. And then there was also the ONCC full committee meeting on September 7th, and main focus of that was just to give a quick update on the construction there. And the CDA construction manager talked about 4 different construction packages, and basically 3 of those are going to be completed by the end of this year. The 4th one, which is package 2, they didn't number them sequentially, is going to be finished in October of 2020. So that's when that will be completed. There probably will be some impact on the interim fly quiet program that will be kicking off next April of 2019. They will have to work around the construction only in this particular package, and that one is taking a lot longer. It's sort of on the west side of the airport, and they're demoing 8 buildings and moving them elsewhere on the airfield. Also, the new aviation commissioner from the CDA attendant, the replacement for Ginger Evans. Jamie Ree was in attendance, and so we expect to see her at most or all those meetings coming up. Thank you.
Okay. Any other reports? Before I turn it over to city manager to talk about the KEB, one last thing I forgot to mention was another successful run, literally, of the trolley this year. This last weekend was the last weekend that the trolley was running, and during, I also forgot to mention, Rock the Block was the 7th and 8th, certainly well-attended, weather cooperated, and we ran 2 trolleys that day, for both days. And looking forward to the trolley next year. City manager, are you trying to turn on
I am.
something?
So my assistant, Tom, will take us through the slides tonight. Before you tonight is the capital operating budget, which really should be capital operating plan, because that's what it is. It's a comprehensive plan for our capital expenditures over the next 5 years. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly tonight, and as we've done in the past, each committee, as it relates to capital projects, will then discuss them as they feel the need or see fit. And then, of course, as we move that into the operating budget, it gets more conversation as well. So up there now is the budget schedule, and we're at the point where we deliver the capital expenditure budget, and in mid to end of October is when we'll deliver the operating budget. So our 5-year capital budget objective is to identify a comprehensive plan, long-term plan for all of our major capital expenditures, which you might wonder, how do I identify a capital expenditure? That's those that are $25,000 or more and result in the acquisition or construction of fixed assets intended to be held for a period of 10 years or more. Once we get to these ideas for the plan, we look at how we can classify them and how we prioritize them. So expenditure classifications are up on the screen now as essential to necessary, things that improve the safety, and then those that are contribute to economic development of the city at the very bottom there. Next is the priorities, A through D. When the highest grade is essential or immediate need, down to optional but beneficial for the city. Looking at the expenditures by priority, you can see that we try to spread the priorities out over the 5 years. So for the last 2 months, Tom, Mike Kopp, and I have been working with Howard and chiefs and everybody else on the staff to identify what these projects are, where they would fit in our priority schedule, and how to classify them. And so we try to, in addition to that, we try to spread them out over the 5 years to try to smooth the curve, if you will. Sometimes it doesn't work out. As you can see, some years have higher expenditures than others. But again, it's all a plan. And that plan moves each year according to priorities, according to funding as well. So you see this total is up to $242 million, which is up from $190 million last year, and we'll get into some of those details in just a minute. So we further break it down on this pie chart by expenditures, where you can see we have the general fund on the right side of the pie, And then on the left, we have parking, the utility fund, vehicles, stormwater, and TIF expenditures. And then the general fund further broken down by public safety, public works street maintenance, public works other, public benefits, and then IT. Moving to the next slide, we look at the revenue sources, funding sources. And again, because this is a plan, we do plug a lot of these items into some sort of GO bond for the future. I'm not saying that we necessarily have to stick with that, because there's always an opportunity for grant funds, and there's always an opportunity for other revenue sources. But in general, more than 50% of it is plugged into GO bonds or loans. And the remainder are various revenues that we get in along the way. I'd like to point out the yellow slice on the upper right-hand corner is federal and state grants, and that's $25 million, and we'll get into that a little bit as we move along here. So revenue sources that we count on for the KEB include the state income tax, home rule sales tax, our telecommunication tax, some rental income, payments for sidewalks through an SSA, interest income, and grants. And then, as I spoke of just a minute ago, the proposed GO bond issues for capital projects, it follows along with the strategic plan priorities, certainly in stormwater and flood mitigation at the very top. Then we have other public works infrastructure improvements. And then as we go into IEPA loans, which we've used quite a bit for recently. As you recall, in the past, I've talked about our wastewater treatment plant, which needed to be updated and is being updated, thanks to the efforts of Paul Burris and his crew. They've been doing an outstanding job to bring that up to where we need to be in the eyes of the IEPA. More specifically, on the next slide, we talk about some of the stormwater projects that we have on the drawing board, and then other public works infrastructure improvements, such as stormwater station rehabs, which is separate from our stormwater projects, our metro station project. We've talked about some underpasses or other for bike improvements. And then new to this KEB are the last two, which is police station and fire station. And we'll get to those in just a minute here. Next slide shows expenditures by fund. Pretty routine as we go through our budget. And then we can jump right into projects as we have them here. So one facet of the budget, which is our street resurfacing program, the council will recognize that is probably the most flexible of all of our budgeting items. We constantly look at that as how much can we get done. Of course, we strive for somewhere from 5 to 7 miles a year to resurface, and we've been very fortunate in years past where we've gotten a lot of state and federal funding for that. That has changed at the CMAP level, which is the organization that really governs the process for that. They are changing it to a more regional focus, and we've talked to the council about that a little bit. They're looking at more regional focus, which may benefit us on another project that we have, but will probably harm the city in local street resurfacing. We were very fortunate to get a number of funds for that, but we see that coming to an end, so we're going to have to look at that pretty closely here in the next few years. But we do have a couple projects in the next slide that show we were able to get some grant funding before CMAP changed that process. So we're looking at Brush Hill from Euclid to Commonwealth. You can see the split on the grant at the bottom. And then also Spring Road from St. Charles to Vallette. That's the same pot of money that we've been awarded for the York Street project. So again, we have been very fortunate to get those funds in the past, and we're going to work very hard to keep those coming. Next project would be storm station rehab projects. These are all the stations that are on the west side of the levee. So when we built the levee, obviously we needed a way to get those waters from one side to the other. A lot of those projects are 20-plus years old, and a lot of those pumps. And so we're looking at that and how we need to take care of those, because obviously that's a priority for the city as we move forward in protecting the residents. The next slide is a fun one. This is a 3D laser cut model that one of the consultants who is bidding for the Phase 2 metro station improvements made. This thing was as big as the conference room table, and it had interchangeable parts so that they could show different models of station design. It was really fun to see. You might see it in the future, but the metro station is one of the big projects that we're going to have coming up. As I just alluded to, we just performed the Phase 2 interviews for architects and engineers, and we'll be bringing those results to the Public Works Committee next Monday. I am very proud to say that we are 91% funded through grants on that project, and we still have a couple applications out there for additional grant funds to move forward with that. So we anticipate design to happen in 2019 and construction to start in 2020. Next one shows some basic but crucial projects for the city. The parking lot program resurfacing, we do those. We try to hit one or two every year. More importantly, though, the right side of that slide is the IT. We've had plenty of discussions at the budget, during the budget process, about how important IT is with the city now. And so we want to keep that up to date, and so we've got some extra dollars in there for future years, because we will be looking at a new operating system or enterprise system for the finance, or at least upgrades to that as we go into the future. Next slide shows some of the IEPA loans and utility projects that we've done and we'll look at as we move forward here. A lot of the lift stations, and again, more, believe it or not, there are still more pieces at the wastewater treatment plant that need to be upgraded. But it's an essential service that we provide, and so we need to continuously update that. And then in addition to that, the next slide shows a lot of the water main replacements, the hydrant replacements. We're painting the tower at St. Charles in 83 currently, and we have one more to go after that. And then our water pumping stations, very critical to what we do. Next slide, again, focuses on the utility fund and the wastewater treatment plant. And after that, we show some of the projects that we've continued to do. The sewer lining, obviously with the IEPA consent decree, we need to continue that so we can keep the clean water out of the system, so that we're not treating that at the treatment plant, and then other various projects that we'll be working on there. Next slide shows the parking system fund, which pays for all of these maintenance at our decks. We have 4, and I call it 4.5 decks, because we own some parking spaces at the 255 building. We're still bound to maintain all those. We've done an excellent job in doing that. So we obviously need to budget for that. And the bottom half of that shows the stormwater management and flood mitigation. We continue to fund the property buyout program. We have some miscellaneous stormwater improvements. And then something that the Public Works Committee is talking about is the bigger project of the southwest area infrastructure improvements, which would be getting some of the additional water to the creek to help areas where we've not been able to build a smaller project. But then speaking of that, we do have 2 projects that will hopefully be in line at Jackson School and York High School in the near future here. Next slide, we talk about the tax increment funds. We have the new downtown TIF, and with that, and the new facade programs that we have, and incentive programs in there. In addition, we have some streetscape funding, and then, of course, there's always the opportunity for aggregating properties for new developments. In the TIF 3, we're looking at West Avenue being repaved in the upcoming years. And then in TIF 4, we're looking at dollars for the York I-290 interchange, where we're still applying for grants. We've been denied on that, but we continue to look at that. And then in TIF 5, we're looking at some sidewalk improvements, and again, looking at some grant dollars possibly for that. So that is the capital budget, and in a very quick summary, where we go from here is that the capital is rolled into the two-year operating budget, which will be out in end of October. As I said earlier, a committee review of appropriate city department budgets, and the finance committee continuing the review of revenues, merging that all together and getting the budget out to the council. It looks like 22nd of October is what we plan to do. With that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation. We're happy to answer any questions now or into the future.
Okay, council should have a full set of the printed KEB in front of them. Any questions regarding what the city manager has presented, either on the slide or in the budget before you? Alderman Dunn.
Yeah, just, I have two questions. One is on the Metra project, so it's at $18 million now. I thought initially we were looking at a number in the $12 million range, maybe $14 million. Has it escalated at all?
No, the plan has always showed it at estimated at 18.2 from when we first applied for the CMAP grant, or CMAC grant. It did show that dollar amount.
The other question was in the wastewater plan, there was a line item on phosphorus that was $16 million, so that was a pretty significant portion of that. Can you add a little color on that one?
I'm happy to. So phosphorus is a treatment, as I understand it, a treatment at the end of the cycle. And what we've been able to do is work with all of the communities along Salt Creek to make improvements to Salt Creek in a natural habitat type of way that has made IEPA happy enough that we don't have to treat for phosphorus right now. So it's a Salt Creek working group. You may see that line item in the budget and wonder what that is. That's our dues to that group when they've been making improvements along the creek so we can avoid the phosphorus. In talking with Howard and talking with Paul Burris, we don't see that holding out forever. We anticipate at some point IEPA is going to mandate phosphorus treatment, and that's obviously a very expensive addition to the wastewater treatment plant.
Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, you mentioned that the two new projects that are in this CAB are the police department, police department and fire department.
Yes.
I know when it comes to the police department, there was a study done and a few scenarios presented that, these numbers reflect one of those scenarios. For the fire department, can you talk about what conversations have taken place and where those numbers come from that you're sliding in for this year?
Yes, thank you. I apologize that I did miss those. So two of the projects for public safety include improvements to the police station and also looking at Fire Station 1, which is the North Station. So with the police station, we had a space study done, and it shows an approximate need for 22,000, 23,000 square feet of space in addition to what we have now, almost doubling the building. And so what this study preliminarily showed is there's a couple options, and three options. One, work on the small stuff and move forward. Second is to put an addition on to the existing building, and that approximate cost is $23 million. The third option is to build a new police station, whether it's in the same space or a new space, and that is estimated to cost $29 to $31 million. So, as you know, we had a joint committee meeting with Public Works and Public Affairs and Safety to look at the results of the space study. The Public Affairs and Safety Committee is going to meet on that again in October. It was the first meeting in October to discuss what recommendation they would make to the City Council as far as moving forward on a police station improvement. Fire Station 1 was built in 1980. And so we are looking at what options are out there for it. We know that if some improvements need to be made, now whether that means improvements on site or improvements somewhere else is up in the air. We've not done a study on that yet. We just know that it needs some improvement into the future. So once we know those ideas, those numbers, we'll bring it back to the city council to see where that priority is.
Just as a follow-up question, I understand the justification for putting, and the timing for putting the police station in. I wonder if the timing for the fire station is on a different track, because we don't have those numbers, we don't have the space study and kind of some options to review. So, it just seems to me that we're ahead of ourselves on the fire station and not quite as much on the police station.
Absolutely.
And we agree with you. This is an opportunity occasionally for us to put big projects like this in front of the council so that you're aware that into the future, we're going to be looking at this. I believe that is in year 5 of the CAB, and that will probably get pushed back in the CAB. Chief Freeman may not be happy with that, but that's how it falls sometimes. So there are a number of big projects, city infrastructure-wise, that we thought the council needed to be aware of for long-term planning so that we can look at everything.
Alderman Toledo?
My eyeballs actually probably can't pop out of my head more than they have tonight. So I guess your mission was accomplished, Mr. Grabowski, in exposing us to these new expenses that's coming down the pipe. My question is on the kind of the appropriate process for aldermen to give feedback, and kind of dovetailing off of Alderman Deuter's comments. I think I understand, specifically with police station, this is in front of the committee now, and you mentioned in your timeline that there's going to be process. So the committee, I heard something about October, but we're gonna kind of be starting the operating budget time period, and I think that the police stuff is in the next 2 years. So can you just talk a little bit more about exactly how that process is gonna kind of time itself out so that I can engage at the appropriate time with feedback or input, or just making sure that I'm paying attention to what's going on? And then kind of the same thing for fire, which you did address is more in the 5th year, so that helps me, that's probably a little bit more of just a, hey, this might be coming kind of thing. And then the other thing is this storm station hardening, or which was storm station rehabilitations. And I don't know exactly, just from a quick glance at this, where that's falling in the timing. If you could just give me a little bit better understanding of how we can engage in these things that are going. I'm assuming the storm station stuff is going through Public Works. So if you could help me understand the timing a little bit better.
Sure. So to the police station first, that's in our opinion probably most in need of some help, and so that's on a shorter timeline than a new fire station would be. We plugged it into the 2-year time frame just as an idea. I mean, looking at a time to hire somebody and design it and whatever we choose to do, it's at least that, if not longer. We plugged the fire station into the 5th year because we only go to 5 years. Does that get pushed out a little further? It may very well, depending on every other priority that we have. So I don't have an exact time frame for the police station yet. The committee will continue the discussion, really begin it in earnest. They heard a summary of the plan, or of the study, and so this will really be the first discussion as far as what's exactly needed, what's the other opportunities that are out there.
At the next committee meeting?
At the first meeting in October, which I believe is Tuesday the 8th, due to the Columbus Day holiday.
And the Public Works storm station?
The storm stations, we're trying to spread those out over the 5-year CAB. As far as I can recall, there's no immediate needs on those, but we just know that as we move down the line, we need to keep those up to date. I'm trying to find it in here as far as a page goes, to give you a better idea.
Which one are you looking for, Jim?
I'm looking for the storm stations. Yeah, it looks like that would be in the 20. Page 38, okay. So if you look at page 38 of the CAB, that will give you an idea of how we're spreading them out over that 5 years.
That's not 16 million on that page. Oh, the next page, 39.
And 39.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Levin?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wondering if you could comment on sort of the other side, because it looks like we're increasing by about $50 million worth of additional capital. And I know we've talked about what our, and most of it, I assume, is coming out of general obligation bonds. We always talk about the limits of property assessed valuations and what percentage of that we're borrowing against. Is that analysis part of, I don't see it in here, or where does that come in? I mean, we could talk about whatever we want to spend, but if we don't have it, then we can't spend it theoretically.
We haven't looked against that number, that 5% cap, as a hard cap on this, because this is a flexible 5-year plan. We recognize not all of these projects are going to be done in 5 years. But again, it's an opportunity to get them out in front of the council to say, here's some of our needs over the next 5 years. You know, we always try to push those out as long as possible, utilize equipment and facilities as long as we can. So we don't anticipate bonding all of this over the next 5 years, but we wanted to make sure it balanced against each other, which is why I said in the beginning, we kind of use that GO bond. If there's not a specific IEPA loan or a grant or something like that out there as somewhat of a catch-all.
Because I know even just in year 2, if we're looking at a new police station, that's 25 to 30 million, that's a good chunk of the increase right there. It's a 10%
Right.
or more increase in our capital expenditure. All right, thank you.
Additional comments? Alderman York?
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on what Alderman Levin asked, the Finance Committee is going to be working with Tom Terzine to kind of present the debt a little bit. As everybody remember, we passed a debt policy, but we've got some additional information on the debt and how it lays out as far as what's applicable to the MUF, what's applicable to what truly is GO bonds and stuff like that. So that's going to be kind of an enhanced part of the whole budget process this year, and we plan to have that available about the time the budget is presented as well.
You have comments? I'll just add that how the KEB has been used in the past, and it really does, I guess there's no good way to bring a $10 million project to council. So this is what staff does. This is what they have to do. I would draw council's attention to page 7 of the budget, which classifies the expenditures and then classifies the priorities of each one. So if you go to each one of these little pages, in the back of the KEB, these project pages, they all have a project classification, they all have a priority. Just to give you an idea of staff's opinion of where this stuff is. But that doesn't mean that during lean times or during times when we don't necessarily have the ability to pay for this stuff, that we don't stretch it. I think the first year I got on the council, we were talking about an anaerobic digester, and I think we joked about the anaerobic digester for 6 years in a row.
Until we paid for it.
Till we finally had enough money to pay for it. But I believe it's staff's obligation to bring this stuff to us, whether or not it fits within our budget, whether or not we bond for it, whether or not we have to go beyond our cap, all is part of the conversation. But at the very least, I think it's staff's obligation to bring this stuff to us, and that's why I draw back your attention to the expenditure classifications. Class number 1, for example, class 1. Project essentials to maintain current level of service. That is something that I would think as an elected official, those are the kind of tools you want, and you want to know that's coming, so that you're prepared if and when you're talking about a $1, $2, $5 million project, you know why staff is bringing it forward. So, but unlike our budget that we go over every year that we know is probably going to be spent within that year, the city manager said it at the beginning of his presentation. This is a plan, as much as it is a budget, it is a plan. But of all the budgets that we do, this is probably the one that changes the most, depending on priorities and needs. And our needs could change from year to year. So, that's just a general statement about our KEB. With that, I'm gonna wrap up. Thank the city manager and staff for their hard work on this. And wrap up that portion of our meeting. On to resolutions. Agenda item 9. Clerk Cyprian, I'd ask that you read the resolution.
A resolution authorizing the issuance of a notice of award for the 2018 storm sewer cleaning and televising project. See item 7.4.
Okay, this is a resolution based on a report that was reported, that was approved earlier. To put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the resolution as read. Motion by Alderman Kennedy, second by Alderman Deuter. Alderman Kennedy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the report, it talked about suspending the rules. We were doing that. There were some issues related to the bidding process, so it delayed us a little bit. So we want to get this moving and get all of these storm sewer cleaning done by the end of this year. And that would actually reflect a complete cleaning of the storm sewer system over the last 3 years.
Fantastic. Okay, any additional comments? Clerk Cyprian.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Saludo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest, absent. Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan, absent. Sabatino.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 9.1 is approved. On to other business. Any other business? I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Alderman Deuter, second by Alderman Leader. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.